The living room was quiet, but not in a comforting way. It wasn't the silence of two people resting after a long day, nor the silence of peace between familiar souls. No, this was the silence of a battlefield just before the first cannon fires. 8 years of shared laughter, arguments, late-night dinners, and morning coffees had all been lived within these walls, and now those same walls would become the backdrop for something final. Evelyn sat across from me. Her posture was perfect. Straight-backed, chin tilted slightly upward, every gesture rehearsed as if she were delivering a corporate presentation. In front of her, on the coffee table, she placed a file folder. The dull slap of the cardboard against the wood echoed like a gavel strike. She didn't even look at me as she pushed it forward. "It's over, Tom," she said. No quiver in her voice, no hesitation. She might as well have been closing a business deal. Inside that folder, I didn't need to look to know what awaited me. Papers, legal demands, the carefully drawn blueprints of my defeat. She was more than happy to explain them aloud. She wanted the house. The same house my grandfather had helped me buy with his savings. She wanted 70% of our joint finances, and she wanted spousal support for at least 5 years. It wasn't a divorce petition. It was a declaration of war. I stared at her, hoping to find some trace of hesitation, some flicker of regret in her eyes. But her gaze was steady, almost gleeful. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her legs with the cold satisfaction of someone who believed she had already won. The smile on her lips wasn't just confident, it was triumphant. "You don't need to open the folder," she said. "I'll explain everything." And she did, every detail sharpened with cruelty, disguised as practicality. The house, the savings, my salary shackled to her lifestyle for years after she walked away. It wasn't about separation, it was about dismantling me. I sat motionless. A kind of coldness washed over me, creeping into my veins until I couldn't feel the warmth of the room anymore. This was the woman I had once loved, the woman I had believed was my partner, and now she sat in front of me like an executioner who didn't need to raise her voice, because the outcome was already set. She finally leaned forward, folding her hands in her lap, her eyes brimming with condescending pity. "Let's not drag this out, Tom. You're a woodshop teacher. You make enough to get by, but not enough for the kind of fight this will be. My lawyer will bury you in paperwork before you ever see the inside of a courtroom. Be realistic. Sign the papers. Walk away quietly. It's the sensible thing to do." Her words were sharp, but they weren't just her own. They carried the echo of a system that too often tips the scales in such moments. In America, divorce disproportionately devastates men financially. Studies show that after a divorce, women's standard of living often improves while men's tends to plummet, sometimes by nearly 30%. Evelyn knew this. She was banking on it. The folder on the table wasn't just legal paperwork. It was a reflection of a wider truth, a cold calculation of leverage, power, and expectation. To her, I was predictable, weak, alone, and now, about to be gutted by a process designed to reward her certainty and punish my hesitation. I should have argued. I should have slammed my fist against the table, or at least asked her why, but I didn't. I sat there, staring at the woman who had once promised to walk through every storm with me, and I realized this storm wasn't meant to be weathered together. It was designed to drown me, and still, I said nothing. The silence stretched on, heavy, suffocating, and in that silence, Evelyn's confidence only grew. She mistook my stillness for surrender, her smirk widening ever so slightly, as though victory was already in her grasp. Looking back now, I know that moment was the first crack in her strategy, because sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes silence is simply the sound of something breaking and rebuilding. But Evelyn didn't see that, not yet. That evening marked the beginning of something larger than either of us could have anticipated. A clash not only of marriage and betrayal, but of pride, resilience, and blood ties thought forever severed. For her, it was the end. For me, it was the beginning of a story she never could have written. Her words lingered in the air long after she stood up, smoothed her skirt, and left the room. "Be realistic. You can't afford a lawyer." They weren't just words. They were a dagger slipped between my ribs, a reminder of what she believed I was. Small, powerless, irrelevant. I didn't chase her. I didn't argue. I didn't even touch the folder that still sat on the coffee table, its edges cutting against the air like a blade left unsheathed. Instead, I sat there in the dim light of our living room. the same living room where birthdays had been celebrated, where arguments had been made up with laughter, where dreams for the future had once been whispered between us at midnight. Now it felt foreign, cold, like the stage of a play I had been dismissed from. When she demanded, I only said 2 words: "You're right." It wasn't just what she wanted to hear, it was what she expected. And for a fleeting moment, I saw it. The relief, the satisfaction that washed across her face like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She thought she had already won. To her, I wasn't her husband anymore, not even her opponent. I was the defeated man who accepted his role in her script, the loser who would bow his head and walk away quietly while she claimed everything we had built. She was wrong, but I let her believe it. That night, after she left the room, I sat in silence for hours. The weight of those 2 words, "You're right," pressed down on me like a stone. They weren't words of agreement. They were words of survival, words meant to buy me time. But time in that moment felt cruel. Every tick of the clock was a reminder of the unraveling of my life. I thought about what love used to be, how it began with the thrill of discovery, how her laughter used to feel like music, how her touch once felt like gravity pulling me home. And now here I was, staring at the echo of that same love, twisted into something unrecognizable. It wasn't intimacy anymore. It was strategy. It wasn't affection. It was calculation. And perhaps that is one of the most devastating truths about relationships. They can transform from sanctuaries into battlefields without warning. What begins as shared dreams can mutate into negotiations of who gets what piece of the wreckage. Across the country, the numbers tell the same story I was now living. Over 40% of marriages end in divorce. Of those, the majority involve disputes over money, property, and pride. The home, often the most cherished asset of a marriage, becomes a weapon, wielded not for survival, but for victory. And far too often, children, savings, and years of effort are consumed in the fire of that war. But statistics don't capture the human side, the silence of a husband sitting alone in a living room that used to be a home, the sound of a woman's heels walking away after announcing the end of a life built together, the sharp contrast between love once promised and love now weaponized. For 3 days I carried that silence with me. I went to work, stood in front of students who had no idea their teacher's life was collapsing, and pretended everything was fine. But when I returned home, the weight returned too. Every photo on the wall was a ghost. Every room in the house echoed with memories that mocked me. I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream. But Evelyn was right about one thing. I didn't have the means to fight her in court. A woodshop teacher's salary could never stand against the kind of high-priced lawyer she had waiting in the wings. She thought that was my greatest weakness. She didn't know it would become my greatest weapon. What Evelyn underestimated was not my income, but my silence. She believed silence meant surrender, but sometimes silence is strategy. Sometimes silence is the moment before the tide turns. On that 3rd night, as I sat alone staring at the untouched folder, I realized something profound. She thought she was isolating me, cutting me off from every possible avenue of resistance. But there was one thing she hadn't calculated, one connection she believed was dead and buried. My brother. We hadn't spoken in 5 years, and for good reason. Our feud had been bitter, final. She knew that. She had seen the fallout. She assumed that part of my life was gone forever. But people forget that family bonds, no matter how frayed, are not easily severed. They bend, they stretch, they snap under pressure. But sometimes, when the moment calls for it, they can be mended. And in my silence, in that lonely room, I realized I had one card left to play. Not money, not power, something stronger, blood. His name is Marcus. To most people in the state, that name inspires dread, respect, or at the very least, a calculated pause before speaking. But to me, for a long time, Marcus was just my brother. My protector in schoolyard fights, my rival in backyard baseball games, the older sibling who always seemed larger than life. But families are fragile things. They don't always shatter in explosive ways. Sometimes they fracture slowly until one day you look across a dinner table and realize the person who shares your blood no longer shares your life. For Marcus and me, that fracture came after our parents died. The family home, an old, creaking 2-story house that smelled of wood polish and apple pie, was the battleground. I wanted to keep it, to preserve it as a place for holidays, for memory, for the comfort of continuity. To me, it wasn't just walls and floorboards. It was a living monument to everything we had lost. Marcus didn't see it that way. He was pragmatic, cold perhaps, but always practical. To him, the house was an asset, an illiquid investment that should be sold, the proceeds divided, and life allowed to move forward. He believed clinging to the past was weakness. I believed letting it go was betrayal. Our argument wasn't just about property, it was about philosophy, about what family means when the people who defined it are gone. The words we hurled at each other weren't just angry, they were final. It was as if we were severing not just our parents' estate, but the bond we had carried since childhood. And so, 5 years passed without a word. Birthdays, holidays, even the anniversaries of our parents' deaths, all passed in silence. Evelyn had been there for the fallout. She had seen the bitterness in my eyes when Marcus's name came up, the way I tightened my jaw whenever the past resurfaced. She calculated correctly that this bond, once broken, would never be repaired. And so she built her plan on that assumption, that my brother was out of reach, a dead connection. But what she miscalculated was something deeper. Estrangement is common, more common than most people realize. Studies suggest that nearly 27% of American adults are estranged from a family member. Siblings, in particular, often fracture over money, inheritance, or unresolved childhood rivalries. For some, those breaks last a lifetime, but for others, the bond of blood remains dormant, waiting for the right moment, or the right desperation, to call it back to life. And I was desperate. In those silent nights after Evelyn's declaration, my thoughts drifted back to Marcus. Not the man who argued with me, not the enemy who walked away from the house we both grew up in, but the boy who used to take the blame when I broke a neighbor's window, the young man who stood beside me at my wedding, smiling wider than anyone else in the room. We had destroyed each other with pride, but pride can only hold you prisoner until you hit the point where survival demands humility. I had reached that point. For 3 days after Evelyn's announcement, I sank deeper into despair. She was right. I couldn't afford to fight her. Every calculation, every attempt to envision a way out ended in the same dark corner. The loss of my home, the loss of my savings, the humiliation of being stripped bare not just by the woman I loved, but by the system designed to reward her ambition. But on the 4th day, something broke. Or maybe it healed. I can't be sure which. All I know is that I picked up my phone and found Marcus's number, buried deep in an old contact list. My hands shook as I hovered over the call button, my pride screaming at me to stop, to let the silence between us remain unbroken. But sometimes, survival requires swallowing pride whole, and so I pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice. I expected voicemail. I expected indifference. Then a deep, familiar voice answered. A voice I hadn't heard in 5 years. Hello? I froze. My throat tightened. For a moment, I thought of hanging up. But then I forced the words out, fragile and unfamiliar. Hello, Marcus. It's Tom. There was a long silence on the other end. Long enough for me to believe he might hang up. But then, softly, I heard him say the name he used to call me when we were kids. Tommy. And in that single word, spoken across 5 years of silence, something shifted. Hearing my brother's voice after 5 years was like opening a door I thought had been bricked shut. At first, neither of us knew what to say. The silence was thick, not hostile, just heavy, like dust settling on old furniture untouched for too long. Finally, Marcus broke it. You wouldn't be calling unless it was serious. He was right. He always had that instinct, the ability to cut through pretense and land directly on the truth. I took a breath, the kind of breath you take before diving underwater. Evelyn's leaving me, I said. The words sounded smaller out loud, fragile compared to the storm inside my chest. And she's taking everything with her. Another pause. Then a low, almost humorless chuckle. I always said she was too sharp for her own good. I should have felt defensive. Instead, I felt a strange relief. He wasn't surprised. And somehow that made me feel less alone. I explained everything. The arguments. The folder of legal documents. Her cold certainty that I couldn't stand against her. And Marcus listened. Really listened. No interruptions, no judgments. Just silence broken by the faint sound of him exhaling now and then, the way he used to when he was calculating his next move in a chess game. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then his voice came through, steady and unshaken. You were right to call me. That sentence cracked something inside me. For years, our last words had been sharp, bitter, final. But now, in my moment of collapse, he offered something I hadn't realized I needed: validation. I don't have money for lawyers, I admitted. She knows that. She's counting on it. Marcus let out a low laugh, not mocking, but dangerous. The kind of laugh that said she has no idea what's coming. Tommy, you forget what I do for a living? Of course I hadn't forgotten. How could I? Marcus wasn't just my brother. He was a trial lawyer, a damn good one. The kind of lawyer who never lost a case he cared about. The kind of lawyer corporations feared. The kind who could turn a courtroom into his stage. The irony was suffocating. All these years of silence, and the one man who could save me was the very man I had exiled from my life. I muttered, "I didn't think you'd help me. Not after everything." His voice softened, losing that razor edge for the first time in years. "We're brothers, Tommy. We fight, we break, we walk away. But when it matters, blood remembers." Those words hit harder than Evelyn's threats, harder than the silence of the past 5 years. They carried something Evelyn had overlooked in all her calculations. Family, once reignited, can burn hotter than betrayal. I felt something stir inside me, a quiet ember of hope. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I didn't feel like a man walking into a slaughterhouse. I felt like someone who had a fighting chance. Across the country, divorce cases are often decided not by love, not by fairness, but by power, legal power, financial power, emotional leverage. Evelyn thought she held all three. What she didn't anticipate was that I still had an ace left in the deck, and that ace was Marcus. Before we hung up, his voice carried the same determination I remembered from when we were kids, when he'd stand in front of me in schoolyard fights and say, "Nobody touches my brother. I'll handle this," he said. "But you need to be ready. This won't be a fight, it'll be a war. And wars aren't won by playing nice." For the first time in a long time I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I finally had something Evelyn didn't expect. Not silence, not surrender, reinforcements. The very next morning, Marcus showed up at my house. I hadn't seen him in half a decade, and when I opened the door, the sight of him nearly buckled my knees. He looked older, streaks of grey in his hair, lines carved deeper into his face, but he carried himself with the same unshakable confidence I remembered, a man built for confrontation, for battle. When he stepped inside, the air itself seemed to shift. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. The fact that he was there, standing in my living room, was enough. Marcus glanced around, his eyes landing on the folder Evelyn had left behind. He picked it up, flipped it open, and scanned the pages with the same sharp focus that used to terrify his opponents in court. "She really thinks she's clever," he muttered, smirking at the legal traps buried in the text. Clauses about asset division, property liens, retirement accounts. Hell, she even slipped in a stipulation about future earnings. Ruthless. "That's Evelyn," I said quietly. Marcus set the papers down and looked at me. "Tommy, let me be clear. If you'd tried to fight this alone, she would have gutted you. This isn't a divorce filing. It's an execution order." The words hit me hard, but he wasn't wrong. He poured himself a glass of water from my kitchen, drank, and then said something that froze me in place. "I'll take her apart, piece by piece. She won't see it coming." I stared at him. "Marcus, I don't want revenge. I don't want to lose everything." He smirked. "Revenge? No, this isn't about revenge. This is about survival. But survival requires making sure she knows she can't bleed you dry. People like Evelyn only understand strength. Show weakness once, and you're finished." And that's when I realized something unsettling. Marcus wasn't just going to defend me. He was going to go on the offensive. That night, as we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, he laid out the plan. It wasn't just legal, it was psychological. He explained how divorce isn't won in courtrooms alone. It's won in the days leading up to them. By planting doubt, by applying pressure, by turning the opponent's confidence into hesitation. "She expects you to crumble," Marcus said, his eyes sharp. "So tomorrow, you give her silence. The day after that, you give her a smile. And when we file our first motion, we blindside her so hard she realizes she's not the only one holding a knife." For the first time, I began to understand. This wasn't just law, it was war. And Marcus had been fighting wars like this for years. But even as I listened, a question gnawed at me. Was I ready for what this war would demand of me? Could I stomach watching the woman I once loved, the woman I still, in some fragile part of me loved, be dismantled in the same ruthless way she had planned for me. Marcus must have seen the doubt on my face. He leaned forward, his voice low, steady, certain. Tommy, she's already declared war on you. The only choice you have now is whether you fight back or surrender everything you are. And in that moment, I realized something. Love had already died. Fairness was already gone. All that was left was survival. The war drums had begun to beat. The war began not with shouting, not with courtroom drama, but with a single envelope. 2 days after Marcus arrived, a courier delivered a thick packet directly to Evelyn's door. She must have expected it was some formality, a meek response, a desperate plea from me. Instead, it was Marcus's counterfiling. Clean, precise, brutal. That evening she called me. Her voice, once sweet, once familiar, was ice. So, you got a lawyer. I didn't answer right away. Marcus had coached me. Silence is power. Every pause makes her fill it with her own fear. Finally, I said, I didn't get a lawyer. I got my brother. For the first time in weeks, she faltered. I heard it, a small hesitation, like a dancer missing her step. Evelyn knew exactly who Marcus was. She remembered the way people talked about him. Ruthless, brilliant, unstoppable. She hadn't just underestimated me. She had forgotten the shadow standing behind me. You think this changes anything? She snapped. I have the advantage. The house. The savings. You had the advantage, I interrupted. Calm. Even. Not anymore. The silence that followed was louder than shouting. And then click. She hung up. Marcus smiled when I told him. Good, she's rattled. That's the first crack in her armor. The next few days were a blur of strategy. Marcus set everything in motion. Filings, injunctions, motions Evelyn hadn't even considered. Where she thought she was playing chess, Marcus revealed he was playing a game she didn't even know existed. He wasn't just fighting for me. He was teaching me how to fight. Every move she makes, he said, you don't react. You anticipate, control the tempo, and you control the outcome. It was terrifying how easily he slipped into this role, as if the 5 years of silence between us had only sharpened his edge. Watching him work was like watching a surgeon cut with terrifying precision. But in the quiet moments, when the legal documents were stacked neatly on the table and the strategy sessions ended, I caught glimpses of something else. Regret. The way Marcus's eyes lingered on old family photos still hanging on my wall. The way he sometimes fell silent mid-sentence, as if haunted by words he never got to say. This wasn't just about me and Evelyn. It was about us, 2 brothers, finding our way back to each other in the middle of a battlefield neither of us had chosen. And then, 1 week after the first filing, Evelyn made her move. I came home to find her car parked in the driveway, her figure silhouetted in the porch light. She was waiting for me, not with anger, but with something worse. A smile. When I walked up, she tilted her head, almost playfully. So this is how you want to do it. You and Marcus against me. Her tone was casual, but her eyes burned with fury. You think he can save you, Tom? You think hiding behind your brother makes you strong? I didn't flinch. Not this time. No, it makes me dangerous. For a moment, her smile slipped. Just a flicker. But Marcus was right. That flicker was all I needed. Because in war, the first strike isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about making them realize they can bleed. And Evelyn had just realized it. After that night on the porch, the game changed. Evelyn stopped pretending this was about love or fairness or even dignity. Now it was open war. Within days, her lawyer filed an emergency motion, a tactical strike designed to corner me. They wanted control of the house, immediate access to the joint accounts, and a temporary restraining order to keep me from harassing her. The accusation was laughable. I hadn't said more than 20 words to her in weeks. But Marcus just smirked when he read the motion. She's overreaching. This is desperation disguised as confidence. At the hearing, Evelyn arrived with her lawyer, polished and perfect, like a queen entering her court. I sat quietly beside Marcus, my heart pounding so hard I thought the judge might hear it. The opposing counsel launched into a performance, painting Evelyn as the victim of a stubborn, financially reckless husband. Every word twisted the knife deeper, not just into my reputation, but into my very sense of self. I clenched my fists beneath the table, biting back the urge to shout. And then Marcus stood. His presence filled the room before he even spoke. Calm, measured, every syllable sharp as glass. He dismantled their arguments one by one, not with anger, but with precision. Where Evelyn's lawyer used drama, Marcus used fact. Where they painted me as weak, Marcus painted me as steady, reliable, the one who had built the foundation Evelyn now wanted to rip apart. By the time he finished, even the judge seemed to lean back, as if needing a moment to breathe. Motion denied. I should have felt triumphant, but what I felt instead was something heavier, the reality of war. Evelyn's eyes as she turned to me weren't just angry, they were venomous. I had humiliated her. Worse, Marcus had humiliated her, and Evelyn was not a woman who forgave humiliation. That night, Marcus poured himself a drink in my kitchen. I sat across from him, still buzzing from adrenaline. "You were incredible," I admitted. He shrugged. "That was the easy part. She hasn't even played her real hand yet." "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, his voice low, almost grim. "People like Evelyn don't just fight in court. They fight in whispers, in rumors, in social circles. She'll try to poison the ground under your feet. Friends, colleagues, maybe even your students. Don't underestimate her." The thought chilled me. Evelyn wasn't just trying to win in court. She was trying to erase me, and Marcus was right. The very next day, I saw the shift. Colleagues avoided my eyes in the hallway. Parents sent curt emails about my professionalism. Whispers trailed behind me like shadows. Evelyn had started her campaign. She wasn't trying to take my money anymore. She was trying to take my name. That evening, Marcus found me staring blankly at the living room wall. "She's going to destroy everything," I muttered. He put a hand on my shoulder. For the first time since he returned, his voice wasn't sharp. It was steady, almost brotherly. "No, she's going to try, but you've got me. And this time, Tommy, I'm not walking away." I met his eyes, and for a moment, I didn't just see my brother, the lawyer. I saw the boy who used to stand in front of me on the playground, fists raised, daring anyone to touch me. Evelyn wanted me isolated, broken, alone. Instead, she had awakened something she didn't expect. She hadn't just declared war on me, she had declared war on us. And for the first time I realized, this battle wasn't going to end in survival. It was going to end in victory. Or ruin. The days that followed blurred together into a relentless grind of depositions, filings, and whispered attacks from every direction. Evelyn wasn't just playing the role of an ex-wife. She had become a strategist, wielding social reputation like a blade. The school board quietly informed me that a concerned party had filed complaints about my conduct. Parents began requesting their children be transferred from my class. Even neighbors I had known for years stopped waving when I mowed the lawn. She was dismantling me, brick by brick. But Marcus anticipated it all. He warned me that when you fight someone who thrives on appearances, you need to drag the truth into daylight. Lies live in the shadows, he said. Our job is to flip on the floodlights. And that's exactly what he did. The first bombshell came during the deposition of Evelyn's best friend, Chloe. She entered the room confident, chin high, rehearsed answers dripping from her tongue. But Marcus had a way of circling his prey, patient and merciless. He started with casual questions, vacations, dinners, Evelyn's mood over the last year. Chloe parried them with ease. Then Marcus slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, hotel bills, jewelry receipts, each one linked to an account Evelyn had secretly opened, siphoning money from our shared savings. Chloe froze. "Miss Albright," Marcus said, voice calm but razor sharp, "do you recognize these transactions?" Her eyes flicked nervously toward Evelyn's lawyer, who shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I don't... Marcus didn't push. He waited. Silence can be louder than shouting. Finally, Chloe broke. Under oath, she admitted it. Evelyn had been siphoning funds to fuel an affair with a man named David Sincade, a wealthy real estate developer she had met at a networking event. My stomach dropped. I had suspected betrayal, but hearing his name, seeing the proof laid bare under fluorescent lights, was like being stabbed with my own trust. But Marcus wasn't finished. He leaned forward, eyes locked on Chloe. So, to be clear, while demanding spousal support and majority savings, Mrs. Miller was simultaneously financing secret trips, hotels and gifts for another man using marital funds. Chloe nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. The room went silent. Evelyn's lawyer muttered something about irrelevance, but even the stenographer paused, her fingers hovering mid-air over the keys. 2 weeks later came the deposition of David himself. I sat in the corner, every muscle in my body tense. He walked in with the arrogance of a man who believed he was untouchable. Perfect suit, gold watch glinting beneath the light, a smirk that spoke of entitlement. But arrogance crumbles under pressure. Marcus questioned him relentlessly, and within an hour, the cracks showed. David admitted to the affair. He admitted Evelyn had promised him the house once she secured the divorce. And worst of all, he admitted it was his idea for her to bleed me dry financially before leaving. Because, in his words, teachers don't fight back. The words hung in the air, venomous and damning. I could feel my pulse in my temples. But beneath the anger was something else. Clarity. Evelyn hadn't just betrayed me. She had conspired against me. My life, my savings, even the house my grandfather helped me buy, all reduced to pawns in her plan for a shinier, richer future. When the deposition ended, Marcus gathered his papers with deliberate calm. Outside, in the sterile hallway, he turned to me. "Now we have her," he said. I looked at him, searching his face. Even after everything she's done. Is this really about winning in court? Marcus paused, his expression softening for the first time that day. No, Tommy. This is about reminding her and you that you were never as weak as she believed. She built her power on the assumption you had no one. That ends now. It struck me then how Evelyn's greatest miscalculation wasn't underestimating me financially. It was underestimating the bond of blood. Marcus and I hadn't spoken in 5 years, but when it mattered, he returned. Not for money, not for pride, but for me. Evelyn thought she had orchestrated a perfect checkmate, but in trying to erase me, she had accidentally resurrected the one man she feared most, my brother, and the truth she had buried was about to become her undoing. 6 months had passed since Evelyn first laid the divorce papers on our coffee table. 6 months since she smirked and told me I couldn't afford to fight her. And now, here we were, the final trial. It was held in one of the largest courtrooms downtown, a space designed to intimidate. High ceilings, marble floors, and the hushed echoes of footsteps that made every movement feel like a declaration. I arrived early, wearing the same suit I had worn at the preliminary hearing, the one that felt like both a wedding and a funeral. But this time, the weight on my shoulders was different. I wasn't walking in alone. Marcus was beside me, exuding the same quiet menace he had from the start. His briefcase clicked against the table like a loaded weapon. His reputation a storm cloud hanging over the entire room. Everyone knew who he was. And more importantly, everyone knew who he was here for. Evelyn entered moments later. She looked flawless, as always, her power suit crisp, her hair styled, her makeup sharp enough to cut glass. But beneath the polish was something new. Cracks. I saw it in the tightness of her jaw, the way her eyes darted toward Marcus before flicking away. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Her lawyer wasn't much better. Gone was the smirk, the condescension. He looked like a man walking into a battlefield he knew he couldn't win. His eyes kept flicking to Marcus's briefcase, as though it were a live grenade. The trial opened with Evelyn's side trying to cling to their original demands, claiming she deserved spousal support, half the assets in the house. But Marcus dismantled their arguments with surgical precision. He presented the financial records. He laid out the secret bank accounts. He projected photographs of Evelyn and David's, trips onto a screen for the judge to see each, one stamped with the dates Evelyn had claimed to be on work. Conferences. Then came the deposition. Transcripts. The courtroom shifted uncomfortably as Chloe's trembling admissions were read aloud. Then David's arrogant words echoed in the hushed chamber. Teachers don't fight back. Every line was a dagger. Every revelation, a stone added to the crumbling weight of Evelyn's case. The judge's expression grew sterner with each passing minute. Evelyn shifted in her seat, her once perfect composure unraveling thread by thread. When Marcus delivered his closing argument, the room was silent. His voice was steady, unyielding. Your Honor, this is not the case of a wronged spouse seeking fairness. This is a case of calculated betrayal, of financial deceit, and of a coordinated attempt to strip my client of everything he built. Mrs. Miller has not only broken her vows, she has broken the law, siphoning marital assets to finance an affair while conspiring to manipulate this court. Justice does not reward deception. Justice exposes it. He turned, briefly meeting my eyes before continuing. My client does not seek revenge. He seeks only what is rightfully his, and the chance to move forward with dignity restored. The plaintiff sought to ruin him. Instead, she has revealed the strength of the family bond she so underestimated. This is not just a legal battle. It is a reminder that greed and betrayal will never triumph over truth. Even the judge seemed to sit back, absorbing the weight of his words. The ruling was swift, almost merciful in its finality. Evelyn was denied spousal support outright. Her claim to the house was dismissed with prejudice, and because Marcus proved she had siphoned over $60,000 of marital funds into her affair, the judge ordered that money repaid directly to me. When the gavel came down, the sound echoed like thunder. Evelyn sat frozen, her face pale, her carefully painted mask shattered. David, seated in the back, slipped out quietly before the ruling was even finished. He hadn't come to stand by her, he had come to watch, and when the tide turned, he left her to drown. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. What I felt was something colder, deeper. Justice. Evelyn had entered this war convinced she would leave me broken. Instead, she walked away, stripped of the very illusions she had built her life upon. Wealth, reputation, and control. She had underestimated me. She had underestimated Marcus, and in the end, she had lost everything. As the courtroom emptied, Marcus stood and placed his hand on my shoulder. "It's over," he said simply. But I knew better. Some battles don't end with a gavel. They end with silence, with the long road of rebuilding. Evelyn's war against me was finished, but the scars she left would take longer to heal. Still, I had survived. And more than that, I had gained something Evelyn never expected me to reclaim. I had my brother back. The courtroom battle was over, but war leaves ruins in its wake. Evelyn's downfall had been public, humiliating, and final. Her once sharp reputation in the community crumbled overnight. Parents who once whispered about me now whispered about her. Her name, once polished with charm and confidence, became a warning. David, the man she sacrificed everything for, vanished from her life as swiftly as he had entered it. He didn't want a partner drowning in legal defeat. He wanted the spoils of conquest, not the burden of scandal. When she reached for him, she found nothing but air. Her friends, those she had used as pawns in her lies, pulled away too. Some had been forced to testify under oath, their loyalty weaponized and shattered in the process. Others simply didn't want to be associated with her disgrace. One by one, they left her to face the silence she had once condemned me to. The woman who had once sat across from me with a smirk, declaring victory before the war had begun, was now utterly alone. And me? For the first time in months, I walked into my home, not as a man waiting for it to be stripped away, but as its rightful owner. The walls no longer felt like they were closing in. The air no longer carried the weight of impending loss. My grandfather's gift, the house he helped me secure, was safe. It would remain in the family, not parceled out as a trophy to a failed marriage. But the real victory wasn't bricks or savings, it was blood. One evening, weeks after the final ruling, Marcus called. His voice was quieter than usual. "Meet me at the old house," he said. I drove there, to the home where we had grown up. It had been the source of our bitter silence for 5 years, a symbol of our division. I half expected another argument, another clash of stubborn pride. But when I arrived, Marcus was sitting on the porch, his shoulders slightly slumped, a bottle of beer in hand. He looked less like the ruthless attorney who had dismantled Evelyn in court and more like my brother, the one who used to share fishing rods and laugh at our father's terrible jokes. We didn't start with the present. We started with the past, with Mom's apple pie, with Dad's half-broken truck, with the long summer evenings we used to spend catching fireflies in jars. And then, after a long silence, Marcus looked at me. "I was wrong, Tommy," he said. His voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard in years. "I was so focused on money, on turning this place into an asset, that I forgot what it really was. A home. Our home." I swallowed hard. The years of anger, of silence, seemed almost childish now. I was wrong too, I admitted. I was so stuck in the past that I refused to see another way forward. We sat there, the weight of our pride melting into something lighter. We didn't decide to sell the house. We didn't decide to split it. We decided to fix it. Together. The following weekends became something new. Paint under our fingernails, sweat on our foreheads, the sound of hammers and laughter echoing through the halls. We weren't just repairing wood and nails, we were repairing us. Evelyn's parting shot had been cruel. You can't afford a lawyer. She thought she was condemning me to ruin. But in her arrogance, she forced me to swallow my pride and reach out to Marcus. In trying to isolate me, she reunited me with the one person I needed most. She wanted to leave me with nothing. Instead, she gave me back everything. It has been months since the trial ended, and I find myself reflecting not on Evelyn, but on the strange way life twists in unexpected directions. Loss can become a doorway. Betrayal can force us to rediscover what truly matters. Evelyn tried to destroy me. What she destroyed instead were the walls between two brothers who had lost each other. Today, as I stand on the porch of our old family home, Marcus beside me, tools in hand, I realize something. She thought she ended my story, but really, she gave me back my beginning.